In this session, we have to talk about propaganda model and mass media. Let's look at what propaganda is. Propaganda is a form of biased communication aimed at promoting or demoting certain views, perception, and agendas. When we talk about propaganda, the one thing that comes up is how biased communication permeates our life and into the public sphere. What mass media does is mass media could possibly play the role of a catalyst in manipulating the population to further the cause of the power elite's agenda. We need to understand what power elite is. Okay, power elite basically refers to that group of people uh, who are in a dominant position or in a power position. Okay, across social, political, cultural spaces, people who control economy, people who control the military, people who control governance, they can be defined as um, the, the group forming the power elite. So it's largely their agenda which needs to be fulfilled, and mass media is used as a catalyst or is employed as as a catalyst to manipulate the population so that this sort of propaganda activities can continue. This propaganda model was first conceptualized in political economy by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky. Both of them are social scientists. And they discussed largely about how propaganda and systematic biases function in the mass media. This model seeks to explain how populations are manipulated and how consent for economic, social, and political policies is manufactured in the public mind due to this propaganda. So to further the cause of the power elites agendas, there is a consensual manufacturing of ideas. Okay, and this consensual manufacturing of ideas happens through three channels largely. One is economic, one is social, and another is political. They lead to policy formations, they affect policy formations, and because the population is manipulated and they agree to this kind of policies, the power elites causes and agendas are easily worked upon. This theory also posits that the way in which news is structured, that is through advertising, concentration of media ownership, government sourcing, creates an inherent conflict of interest which acts as propaganda for undemocratic forces. What does that mean? It means that the way news content is created, it is created largely through these kind of areas. One is the very fact that news organizations survive because of advertising revenues. Now, who pays for those advertising uh, revenues? You have to understand that. Then the concentration of media ownership. Some time back, we did discuss about who owns the media, and who owns the media is going to define how media is going to uh, control, manipulate, operate, and offer different kind of content. So when media ownership is concentrated by a handful of people who are in a power position, who have government backing, who have uh, policies on their favor, and they are constantly backed by different uh, government organizations or people who are in the privileged position within the government, it all forms a nexus. And this largely comes in conflict with those people who believe in a larger force of democracy and those who operate in undemocratic spaces. An example that Herman and Chomsky identified was anti-communism during the Cold War. Such anti-ideologies exploit public fear, hatred of groups that pose a potential threat, either real or exaggerated or imagined. Communism once posed the primary threat, and communism and socialism were portrayed by their detractors as endangering freedoms of speech, movement, the press, and so forth. They argue that such a portrayal was often used as a means to silence voices critical of elite interest. Now, those people who are in the power position, those people who control the population largely, they would look at uh, communist ideologies, socialist ideologies, or handful of people or group of people who believe in constant struggle for to create equality, to bring in um, balance in the power structures that exist in the society. Those people pose as a great threat to the establishment, to the dispensation, those people who are in power. So anti-communal ideas, anti-communism ideas were propagated, saying that these people are, this group of people are going to create problems. They're going to disrupt peace. They're going to emerge as potential threat to the kind of country or geography they are operating in. So because of this, anti-ideologies were spread up across. And that is where propaganda comes to picture. This is where we have to understand it in the context of how they position the ideas of propaganda and what role media could possibly play in taking this dialogue forward. Understand this is also happening at this point in time in our country. Those people who are fighting for the rights of the less privileged, those people who are fighting for the rights of the farmers, or to ensure that the division, the economic divisiveness that exists in a country is reduced. Those people are deemed as anti-nationals. Those people are deemed as nationals. Those people are deemed as people who support or carry a soft corner for, for people who incite violence. That's the kind of idea that is given through the media, through the both the mainstream media as well as the governing elite. So the moment elitist crowds' interests are hampered, or those people who are critical of their operations or their policies, there is one group which is always going to be questioned. They're always going to be put in put under the court of law or put in the behind the bars, because they pose as a larger threat, because they question, they constantly argue in favor of balancing the society. Okay. What does manufacturing consent largely mean? It reveals how upper class controls and skews the news to get the masses to believe whatever serves them the best. Is what I was talking about, that understand upper class from the point of view or perspective of economic class division, and how they, when they control the media, when they have friends in the media who in turn take favors from them, or who become rich, or who run bigger companies by taking favors in cash and kind, they are going to be close to them, and they are going to kind of produce news or offer news which are favorable to them. And in the process, what happens is those people who consume news on regular basis, they are indoctrinated with those kind of ideas to believe that the governing elite or those people who are in the power position are actually doing the right thing, or the kind of policies that are propagated or pushed forward are right for them. So they get blinded in the process. So the mass media has a dark side to it that you may not have thought about before. In addition to entertaining us, these sources also promote certain social norms and behavior. The government and other people who control the country are more in charge of what you see on the television than what you might think. And this is where independent media has a larger role to play, especially to save democracy, especially to save constitutional principles. We need to be extremely critical of how and when mainstream media offers a certain kind of content. And you have to read between the lines as media consumers, and which is what doesn't happen most of the times, especially because people are consistently manipulated. These are the claims of Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent, the political economy of the mass media. Chomsky argues that an unequal division of wealth and power comes a widely uneven distribution of stories that favors the upper class. Because of wealth concentration and power concentration, the stories take shape accordingly, favoring the upper class. Even though the media boasts objective, trustworthy reports, they are only a puppet of those who are really in charge. And this is also the reason why Chomsky took such a flack. Back in the day, so much of criticism around saying that he is actually against the mainstream media's operations. What are the three important principles or lessons that could be taken from this book? The media covers events in ways that favors the elite ruling class. Because of the need for advertising revenue, news outlets focus on stories that will benefit their advertisers. And who are the advertisers? The advertisers could be the governing elite. The advertisers could be friends of the governing elites or the industrialists. So understand that now we have politicians and industrialists owning up media, right? So in such sort of a situation, understand what kind of content we are offered to consume. Experts give facts and information that are really just a form of the upper class controlling the media with the money. So even those experts could be could be paid for in order to argue favorably for the governing elite. In manufacturing consent, both Chomsky and Herman say that a propaganda model focuses on the inequality of wealth and power. Okay, the already existing inequality of wealth and power expands, and its multi-level effects on mass media interest and choices. Okay, so every choices that the mass media makes in terms of production and dissemination of information and content are somewhere in collaboration with what serves best the governing elite. It traces the routes by which money and power are able to filter out the news that fits to print, marginalize, dissent, and allow the government and dominant private interests to get their messages across to the public. Okay, this is exactly what is happening at this point in time in our country since last couple of years, especially. So you can read between the news, you can look at different events that has unfolded over a period of time and see how and what kind of media content is passed on for consumption and why those news stories kind of gather momentum or gain attention from the governing elite, from those people who are controlling the bureaucracy, controlling the economy of our country. According to the theory, media operates as a business which sells its products. Readers and subscribers are the products, right? We are the ones who are buying ideas. To other business entities that do the advertisements in media rather than performing the function of disseminating news for the public. So what has been the most foundational or you know, for functional, operational, functional idea of media is not there, which is passing information unbiased, truthfully. This is what has been the role of journalism, so to say. If you are an entertainment media and your focus is primarily on entertainment content, then that's a different thing. If a news media starts behaving like an entertainment media and like behaving like a mouthpiece of political parties and the governing elites or the business class people, then what would happen is what we would have as a byproduct of journalism is basically rotten because they stop performing their role of disseminating news for the public. So the information that you get has gone through multiple filters and filters which favors not the public, which favors the governing elite. So here the news is being misshaped and reformed from its original form. So you don't see unbiased reporting. You don't see issues taken up on primetime news channel, which are crucial or important as far as the democracy is concerned. So Herman Chomsky calls the factors which reshape news as filters, like I told you. The news is being filtered by each of these factors before they reach its audience or general public, whether it is going to be suitable, whether it is um, not showing the politicians and the business class people in a bad note. So the 5 filters are, we're going to go through them one by one. First one is size, ownership, and profit orientation of mass media. The major mass media organizations are in the hands of the few elites. Those people who own media are basically in a better power position, economically in a better position. The major news channels, newspapers, and other mass media instruments are part of larger corporations and conglomerations. Now you can see that how media has been corporatized over a period of time. That's why you don't have too many independent news media houses doing journalism. So it's all corporatized. The information presented to the public will be varying as per the interest of these organizations. As a part of maximizing profit, they sacrifice some news objectives. Some news objectives would be truthfulness, objectivity, prioritizing a certain kind of news which is important for the development of a democracy over something else. The extensive financial interest of these organizations may endanger the quality of news, because news could be sold, journalists could be bought, a certain kind of propaganda drive could be pushed forward against money, against cash, kinds, every kind. It is common around the world that media is in the hands of the government being puppets, because they can't go against the establishment. Any anti-establishment news content cannot be put forward. That is one of the reasons why the media was gagged at back during the emergency days. There was no newspapers, no organizations apart from the government's one, which was Doordarshan and All India Radio, which were allowed to function. And this is what happens most of the times. Now, what has happened is it's not just the government who is controlling the information cycle. It's also the people who are privately owning media organizations and news corporations. They control alongside. So corporate organizations who own media never publishes the financial detail, which may endanger them. How much money they have, what is the financial growth or sustenance over a period of time. The advertisements play the major role in the funding of mass media. If advertisements are not funding mass media, then the price of newspapers may include the cost of its production, and also it's applicable for the mass media like television, radio, and electronic media. Sometime back I was talking about the cost of a newspaper and why is it so. Printing cost of a the cost to customer ranges somewhere between 5 rupees to 12 rupees. Okay. Printing cost has gone up to 20 and 20 plus for each newspaper that you get a household. Now, how are they balancing this? They're balancing it because of the advertising revenue. Now, the advertising revenue, when people are advertising in your newspaper, they also expect favorable publicity. So if you have to stay afloat in the market, in the media market, and continue to run the business, then you cannot dissatisfy your advertisers. It is not through the subscription model that the media industry survives. Media industry survives because of the funding that they receive through advertising revenue from different companies. So those people who, who are funding your organization, you cannot dissatisfy them. So it is common that the media filters the news in favor of their uh, uh, advertising producers. So the ethics of mass media is often modified for their existence by the media. Okay, what should be ethical? It should be ethical that we should produce objective, truthful, unbiased news content for the public, so that the public is completely aware about what is happening in and around them in the most truthful manner. So tomorrow, if they are in a position to question, they should be knowledgeable about it. So when your knowledge source itself is corrupt, then there is an issue. For example, a corporate organization may threaten the media saying that they will withdraw advertising contract if the media publishes any news which damages the reputation of the organization. That's very clear. It's a give and take relationship. That's where, when journalism becomes a business, it's the most problematic business in the world. Next point is the source. Even the biggest media organizations cannot afford to have reporters and camera persons wherever the news breaks. There will be some sources for news, and the media is supposed to protect these sources. And at the same time, there will be some powerful sources which tend to change the policies of media. And it all happens because of kind of nexus. Top-notch journalists, editors, publishers, media owners, media house owners, other businesses, business communities, and the governing elite forming that nexus. For availing a continuous flow of news, the media takes suitable action in favor of the source, because they have to sustain and continue. The relationship have to be maintained with these sources, and it is common that the news is published keeping the source in mind. Because unless the source is strong, they cannot continue to publish news. For example, the spokesperson, the prime minister or president is considered as a powerful source of news. For making sure a proper flow of news, the organization keeps the sources delighted by fine-tuning the news which would favor the governing elite, like I told you. Flags. The next point, flag refers to the negative responses to the statement or program published or broadcasted. If the flags are produced in a large scale, it is destructive to the media. The media will always have an eye for the negative responses. It will have a thorough look at the materials and news before it publishes or broadcasts some news about a publicly loved figure. As a filter, it will try to avoid the news items which may bring some sort of negative responses. People get to know that this person is corrupt. People get to know that this person has indulged in different kind of criminal activities. So that sort of image building is not good for one individual or a party or business community. For example, most of the media never publishes news projecting negative image of religious leaders without strong evidence, because they would have a lot of devotees who would create ruckus, and there could be law and order situation that could happen. It has happened in the past. If you look at the case of Ram Rahim, the kind of violent situations that arose and Panchkula and entire Chandigarh area being under curfew for such a long period of time because of the kind of sexual allegation cases against him and money laundering and all sort of things, because it may harm the reputation of media organizations among the public. So if you go wrong, the public might have a short-lived memory, they might forgive you, but those people who are party activists, those people who are devotees, those people who has put immense trust and faith in organizations and individuals who are larger than life, who are publicly loved, they are not going to forgive. So your office could be vandalized, you could be brought in bad light, and all these things would lead to loss of advertising revenue, withdrawal of advertising funding, loss of TRP, all those kind of things, which are not good for the media organization. Anti-communism, as far as the American corporations and elite groups are concerned, communism was an elite ultimate evil because it took their wealth and power from them. It threatened their superior positions and higher class. Understand who are in superior position and why they are there. If you control military, if you control economy, if you control governance, you're done for good. You would always be in an ultimate position, power position. And the next rung would be the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats are like the stepping corner. So they are going to ensure that this thing continues. So the higher class people always feel threatened by communists. People who think from a communitarian point of view, from a communitarian perspective, people who think about bringing social equality and justice, they always feel threatened. So what happens is these power elites who are the owners of media might adopt a policy to bring censorship to articles and news which talks about the good side of communism. This is exactly what has happened in America. The American elite even feared the word communal. This is the fifth filter in propaganda model suggested by Herman Chomsky. Example, the news which says about the communal living of workers was never allowed to be published in America because they were afraid of a revolt by the workers if such articles and news are disseminated. So understand why information gatekeeping happens as far as mainstream media news dissemination is concerned. The propaganda model explains how mass media can be employed to manipulate positions, population in the interest of ulterior motives. What is the ulterior motives? To sustain the idea of power and position, to continue the act of corruption, to make more money for individual selves, for families, and to continue creating that gap between the rich and the poor. The power elite includes leaders of the military, corporate, and political elements of the society. They're generally the ones who control and therefore benefit from mass media using propaganda. There's a book called The Power Elite, which is published by sociologist C. Wright Mills, in which Mills calls attention to the interwoven interests of the leaders of the military, corporate, and political elements of society, and suggests that the ordinary citizen is relatively powerless, subject to manipulation by those entities. And these entities who control this sort of structures, they would endlessly exploit because they're in the power positions. So ordinary citizens like you and me, unless in a democracy we start questioning, unless we start voicing our opinions, unless we gather public traction and momentum on as a consensus to stand against this sort of ideas, we will never be given justice. We would always remain in a status of being a fool by those people who are controlling. According to Mills, the eponymous power elite are those that occupy the dominant position in the dominant institutions like military, economic, and political of a dominant country, and their decisions or lack of decisions have enormous consequences, not only for the US population, but the underlying population of the world. That's why US media is so powerful. That's why we always look for the first world countries, where is US, Russia, China, UK. If there is some sort of economic movement, if there's some sort of military movement, there's some sort of corporate or political movement that happens in these countries, it has a direct impact on those people who are in our which has a direct impact on those people who belong to the third world, so basically us. These two models understand the propaganda and the power elite concept. The evidence how mass media can be used to reinforce powerful positions of power and interest. For example, there are two examples here. One is during the Gulf War, which happened in the 1990s. The media's failure to report on Saddam Hussein's peace offered guided the public to look more favorably on the US government's actions. You have to read a bit more about the Gulf War to know how Um, Anti-Hussein reporting by the US media kind of guided the public during that time to create a villain out of person. During the Iraq invasion in 2003, the media's failure to report on the legality of the war, despite overwhelming public opinion in favor of the only invading Iraq with UN authorization, minimized public awareness and outcry over that illegality. So when gatekeeping happens, understand that information doesn't reach the public. And sometimes independent media intervenes and offers the kind of um, offers to fill the kind of gaps that exist. So in such sort of a situation, what would happen is we need to constantly engage in spreading public awareness. The moment public awareness gets minimized because of the lack of information, what would happen is you would always be in a position to be neglected. According to the liberal watchdog groups, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, which is called FAIR, there was a disproportionate focus on pro-war sources, while anti-war sources only made up 10% of the media, with only 3% of the US sources being anti-war. So the rest of the 7% was pro-war. And this is the data that is collected by a liberal watchdog group, media watchdog group called Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. What would happen is that would gather the momentum around pro-war sentiments or pro-war ideas that no, our country should go to war with Iraq and should decimate. So this is what happens. With regard to global warming, the media, in the interest of those who make a tremendous amount of money from the fossil fuels, give near equal balance to people who deny climate change, despite only about 1% of climate scientists taking this view. This allowed the debate to continue when in reality there is a firm scientific consensus, in turn allowing those corporations to continue profiting of human behavior that in reality harms environment, something that continues to happen in the US, in UK, even in India for that matter. That one group of people are constantly in denial because they live in that bubble. They think that money can actually in the world, and if anything happens, we will not get our lives won't get hampered, or we won't get affected so much so as against those people who are in the lower ranks of the society. So even though there are so many scientists who continuously debate for or lobby for um, climate change policies, the other group who have friends in businesses which make money from fossil fuels, they would continue to do so. Okay, so that's more or less what I wanted to talk or share about, the concept of power elitism and how propaganda enters into the scenario of mass media, and how those people who are at the helm of the affairs, how they control the media and manipulate the population constantly, and that disrupts democratic ideals, that disrupts constitutional principles, and creates a public which is completely blinded in the context of consumption, and who is never critical of the kind of policies or the frameworks that is put forward by those people who are in power. I'm stopping here. Thank you.